And now, a message from the shed with Pete. Hello there, listener. Just a quick note from me to thank you for listening. Yeah, it means a lot that you press play on this podcast every day. And I just wanted to let you know that I don't take you for granted. So many of you reach out to me in so many ways and so many days and let me know that you're listening, appreciating, and most importantly, learning along with me every day. And so I just wanted to say thanks. I can't think of a more gratifying way for me to spend my work time than making this podcast every day, than producing this show every day. I'm super grateful to you that you're listening or still listening and learning along with me. So let's do it. Stand up. Yeah, that John Carroll written and performed song never gets old. Thank you very much, John. You should buy that song if you haven't already. You can go to johncarroll.org and pay like $3.99 or whatever you want to buy that song and support John Carroll and all of his social media platforms. He is such a great and talented guy. Speaking of gratefulness, so happy that you are still with us, John, and doing everything that you do every day. Shout out to my friend John Carroll here at the top. And speaking of friends, I was very happy to catch up with State Senator in Iowa, Zach Wahls, who I've known for several years now. Had several conversations over the years with, most recently, a couple months back when Iowa passed in the middle of the night their extreme anti-abortion laws. Zach joined me from my hotel room in Iowa City, Iowa, and we had an awesome conversation about a whole bunch of different issues, and that begins at 17 minutes after my fake impeachment primer. But right now, I wanted to take you through impeachment. I'll mention a couple of other news stories, but I've got several clips and things to read and say about this news regarding the Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, announcing an impeachment investigation, not necessarily a vote yet. There's a lot to say about this, and I watched and read hours yesterday aggregating this information because I wanted to give you as wide a perspective on what we are about to see and the charade, really, that we are about to see in the next few weeks and most likely over the next year. I feel like the most important thing I learned and place to start on this is that it was ordered by the former disgraced and twice impeached president. There is plenty of reporting now that he has been meeting with both Kevin McCarthy and other congressional leadership like Elaine Stefanik, imploring and insisting that they do this because, and obviously this is what he has always done, which is try to sully his opponent. When he was the president, he wanted Ukraine to investigate the former vice president and his likely presidential opponent, Joe Biden, and now he wants Congress to investigate the current president and his likely opponent, Joe Biden, just to muddy the waters, just to flood the zone with shit, just to create suspicion around him. And will it work? Well, that's a question for, frankly, any of us to answer, given our own narrative of how these strategies play out in the media and in public. And apparently, according to a whole bunch of people that I like, trust, and respect, it is not going to work. That's one analysis, but I find that coming across the board from analysts, experts, listeners whose analysis and commentary on these things I respect. And let's just give a little bit of that. Start with some tweets and commentary. David Frum, former Republican Bush administration speechwriter and regular guest of mine here on the show, tweeted sarcastically, "The emerging Republican consensus, having a drug-addicted child is an impeachable offense, but trying to mount a coup d'etat and overturn the Constitution by violence is not." And Greg Sargent says, in reply to that, actually, Republicans are impeaching Biden for the transgression of fairly defeating Trump in the 2020 election. Yeah, that's why Trump wants them to impeach Joe Biden, because he lost and he's mad and he's a tiny baby. All right, so that's just the setup and a little bit of my thoughts around this news. But let's set it up further with more context, starting with a clip from House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, who announced this impeachment inquiry into President Joe Biden yesterday. Just a little bit of that. Just a taste of McCarthy's hollow, empty soul.
House Republicans have uncovered serious and credible allegations into President Biden's conduct.
Oh, good grief.
These are allegations of abuse of power,
Nope.
obstruction,
Nope.
and corruption.
Uh,
And they warrant further investigation
Nope.
by the House of Representatives.
Already been done.
That's why today I am directing our House committee to open a formal impeachment inquiry into President Joe Biden.
Okay, there you go, Kevin McCarthy, a little bit of him making the announcement yesterday. Of course, one of the interesting developments that came up yesterday was apparently when President Donald Trump was in office, his Department of Justice did something that gave now President Biden a major assist in the coming impeachment probe. Politico writes, Joe Biden has a literal trump card to play against the House's new impeachment inquiry because in January 2020, the Donald Trump-led Justice Department formally declared that impeachment inquiries by the House are invalid unless the chamber takes formal votes to authorize them. That opinion, issued by Trump's Justice Department Office of Legal Counsel, came in response to then House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's decision to launch an impeachment inquiry into Trump without initially holding a vote for it. Not only is it still on the books, you guys, it's binding on the current administration as it responds to Tuesday's announcement by Speaker McCarthy to authorize an impeachment inquiry into Biden, again without a vote. All right, now let's get back to a little more from yesterday's Scott Perry. He's a Republican congressman from Pennsylvania who is an extremist. And yesterday he put on this really angry performance in front of the press on the steps of the U.S. Capitol after Kevin McCarthy announced an impeachment inquiry. He was asked by a reporter, what actual evidence do you have opposed to allegations to show the American public that would merit an actual impeachment of inquiry of Joe Biden and prove that today isn't just about some of you? Well, Scott Perry didn't like that question or the tone or the lady it came from.
Yes, ma'am.
Can I just ask, what actual evidence do you have as opposed to allegations to show to the American public that would merit an actual impeachment inquiry of Joe Biden and prove that today isn't just about some of you?
Oh, I don't know.
Bullied Speaker McCarthy for the sake of enacting political revenge.
This isn't about political revenge. We have the bank accounts. We can see, ma'am, you can see that the homes that the Bidens own can't be afforded on a congressional or Senate salary. You also understand that it's not normal for family members to receive millions of dollars from overseas interests. Those things aren't normal. That's not normal to have 20 shell companies. These things are not normal, and it alludes to not only just widespread corruption, but money laundering, if not influence peddling itself. And we also have the vice president at the time on record saying that the prosecutor was fired. Well, son of a bitch, the prosecutor was fired, right? Because the prosecutor was going after the company that his son was working on. That's what we have. If you can't see that, if you are that blunt, look, I'll turn it over to the attorneys.
Okay, so that's really important to think about and analyze both his performance and what he said. Now, what he said was just a flooding the zone of bullshit. And Charlie Sykes can pick up on that in a moment because he analyzes that on MSNBC pretty well. But it's also important just to mention his rage, his outrage. He was outraged at the reporter. I want to give that reporter credit, and most, I think, of the political, even the inside the Beltway political reporting, even the mainstream corporate political reporting credit, because as of now, they don't seem to be taking these Republicans seriously. But as I think it was Jen Rubin who tweeted yesterday, the reckless, unfounded impeachment and shutdown are a test for the mainstream political media. Will they avoid both siderism and place Republicans under a microscope? I hope I'm wrong, but I doubt it. It's not the White House says there's no evidence. It's there is no evidence. It's not the two sides are at a standoff over government funding. It's Republicans are reneging on the deal they struck during the debt negotiations. Jen Rubin says it's time for truth telling, not fake, distorted, quote, balance. I think that's probably one of the most important points right there. So there's that. And now here's Charlie Sykes talking a little bit more about the strategy that you just heard from Scott Perry of flooding the zone with shit. That's the whole Steve Bannon ideology that Trump and so many of his minions, his supporters, have been at times very effectively employing since Trump came down that escalator. Charlie, take it away.
Well, I think we're going to see this clown car at center stage. Look, I mean, if they have the goods, all well and good, but they clearly don't. To the congressman's point, this was craven, it was cynical, it is pandering. But you understand why they're doing it. I mean, we're now finding out that Donald Trump talked with met privately with House leaders and told them that he wanted them to do this because, to speak pure Steve Bannon, the goal here is to flood the zone with shit, to devalue impeachment by making sure that everybody is impeached. But I think what's going to be on display is the no there there. And I think that this is what you're hearing from Republicans. If you're going to do this, if you're going to make the Congress hostage to this agenda, if we're going to spend the time debating whether or not we remove the speaker, impeach the president, shut down the government, defund the Department of Justice, defund special prosecutors, block the military from making up promotions, we ought to be able to explain to the American people why this is a good idea. But Kevin McCarthy, who engaged in that rather dramatic act of self-gelding, made this promise, and now he has to follow through, even if it means, as the congressman noted, reversing the position he held 10 days ago when he said that he would have a vote of Congress to begin this inquiry. So this is we're about to go into a very, very messy month. This is going to be Kevin McCarthy's month from hell. Unfortunately, he appears willing to drag the rest of the country with him.
There you go. Charlie Sykes putting it absolutely perfectly, giving us a preview of what's to come and using the phrase self-gelding, which I quite appreciated. All right, well, what is the reaction from Democrats in the House and Senate on this? Well, I'll just give you two quick examples. First, here is John Fetterman, the senator from Pennsylvania, who went viral with this reaction.
Ask you about this news that Speaker McCarthy has formally launched an impeachment or has said he's going to.
Oh my God, really? Oh my gosh, it's devastating. Ooh, don't do it. Please don't do it. Oh no.
We gotta run back to the office, but
Yeah, there was his handler. We got to go. Sorry, but Fetterman nailed it in the hallway of the Senate yesterday when reporters asked him about it. And here is a bit more articulate, eloquent response from constitutional scholar Jamie Raskin, who appeared on MSNBC with Joy Reid last night.
When you have a president who's been indicted not once, not twice, not three times, but 4 times, he has been found liable for sexual abuse and has 2 impeachments. To me, it sounds like they are just inviting Democrats to start talking about that stuff, as John Fetterman said. Is that what's going to happen in the House?
Well, you know that I'm the ranking Democrat on the Oversight Committee against Mr. Comer. I can't tell you the number of Democrats who've come up to me today to say, let them do the impeachment. It will be the end of the Republican Party. It will end up in complete defeat and humiliation for them. Of course, I've got a little bit too much respect and love for the Constitution just to let them go down that road, with at least pointing out that the constitutional standard is treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors, and they don't have evidence of any wrongdoing at all of Joe Biden. And that's not for a lack of evidence. We have thousands and thousands of pages of documents that they've subpoenaed, that they've gotten, dozens of hours of witness interviews that they've gotten. But far from proving their claims, it all disproves their claims. It all shows that nobody's laid a glove on Joe Biden, and he wasn't involved in any of Hunter Biden's business activities. And so that's really the end of the case. But you are making the sharp point that half of the impeachments in American history of presidents have been against Donald Trump, 2 of the 4. And the last one ended up not just with a successful impeachment vote in the House, but a 57-43 vote, the most widespread bipartisan, bicameral renunciation and denunciation of a president's activities. And that, incidentally, is what gives, I think, a lot of impetus to what's going on around the country in terms of trying to block Donald Trump from even getting on the ballot because of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, which says if you've engaged in insurrection or rebellion, you can't serve again in office. And so he's already been essentially found to have engaged in insurrection by both the House and the Senate as a legislative fact.
All right. Well, there you have it. That's all the clips and commentary I have for you. The only thing I would add is the consensus I saw, would love to know what you think, is that this is going to damage the Republican Party, the Republican brand, and put Kevin McCarthy's speakership in peril, but much more importantly, put House Republican majority in peril as a result of this gambit. People like to point to historical precedent when it comes to their political analysis. Fine. A lot of people pointing to the Clinton administration and the fact that Bill Clinton was impeached for lying about having an affair, and that people apparently didn't like that. And that was the result and reflection on the next election. Republicans were rebuked for impeaching President Clinton is the political analysis consensus about that historical fact. I pointed out that I felt like all these wild goose chase investigations into Hillary Clinton when she was Secretary of State, like Benghazi and more, that was damaging to her. And plenty of folks point out, well, that was Hillary Clinton. That was definitely different. But that was the same attempt to damage her reputation before she ran for president. Did it help? Did it hurt? I think it helped hurt her. But will this hurt Joe Biden? And from what I can see, a lot of smart people saying they don't think it will. I think it might still, but most people don't agree with me, and I'm almost always wrong with such things, which is why I spend more time aggregating smarter people's ideas than sharing too much of my own. And there you have it. Okay, well, that's all I've got for you in this opening segment. I want to get to my guests. Before I do, I can't do the show without you. Please think about, if you haven't already, sign up for a paid subscription, join our community where there are so many benefits, and I can keep pumping out these great interviews and great shows each and every day. But now it's time to get to my guest, and I've already told you just a little bit about him at the top. He was elected to the Iowa State Senate in 2018, elected to a second term in 2022, representing Senate District 43 in Iowa. Prior to his election, he worked primarily as an advocate in the LGBTQ civil rights movement, following his 2011 testimony before the Iowa House Judiciary Committee in defense of marriage equality and his, quote, two-mom family. And you may remember that speech from 2011 going absolutely viral, making him famous in the world of politics and launching a career. He's a former Eagle Scout, co-founded and led Scouts for Equality, which successfully executed a national campaign to end discrimination against LGBTQ people in the Boy Scouts of America. He's an awesome guy who is a huge pillar in his community. I've gotten to know him really well. He's super smart, has a master's from Princeton University's School of Public International Affairs and Public Affairs, bachelor's degree from the University of Iowa. He's married. His wife has also got a PhD. She's a writer, Chloe Engel, and they live together with their dog and maybe soon starting a family, which is where we started our conversation. Why would you want to have a kid now, is what I asked to young people, which all young people have been asked throughout human history, I suppose. He gives a great answer to that and so much more. We sat down in my hotel room. I think the audio sounds pretty good. I'll put out some video of this interview as well because Zach is very handsome. We had a great conversation. I love talking to Zach. You should go follow and support him on TikTok, on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, etc. All linked in the show notes. And thank you to longtime listener Mark Nolte. This was his idea to bring me out to Iowa City. You can bring Pete to your town, introduce him to some of your most thoughtful, intelligent, experienced, wise friends to interview for the show. Consider it. Bring Pete to your town. Thank you, Mark Nolte. Let's do it right now with Zach Wahls. Look who I've got. Zach Wahls. Thank you very much for joining me in my hotel room, and more importantly, for picking me up at the airport, and more importantly, for being basically my friend for years. We could not talk for a year. As soon as we talk, it's like we're old friends. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm thrilled to do it, and I'm glad to have you back in Iowa.
There's a lot that I want to talk with you about, politics in general, Iowa maybe, and then I wanted to start with, I didn't ask you before, so I can edit this out, but you and your wife have decided to become parents.
Mm-hmm.
My question isn't about the process. My question is, you're really smart. You went to Princeton.
Mm.
Your wife is even smarter than you are.
Correct.
Journalist, writer.
Also went to Princeton.
Also
but for like undergrad, which is the really impressive
and
part.
Then has an accent.
Oh my God.
Which
so
makes
good.
her sound smarter.
Correct.
Point is,
how much do you guys, being as educated as you are, talked about not having kids as a result of where the world is at, whether it's America and violence and potential violence and democracy dying, or what I feel like a lot of parents your age-ish who are intelligent and educated might talk about, climate stuff. Like, is that a conversation you had? Do you mind my asking about that?
No, it's a totally reasonable question, and certainly it's not a decision that we made lightly. You know, my wife is a few years older than I am. I'm 32, and so, you know, we were at a point where we decided if we wanted to have kids, it was time to start trying. I've always wanted to have kids personally. I've just always wanted to be a dad. Chloe hadn't always wanted to have kids per se. It wasn't something, you know, there's some women who just really, you know, what they want more than anything in the world. And that was never really the case for Chloe. Right. But it was something that early in our relationship we talked about and decided that was something that we wanted to do if we stayed together. And we're coming up on 2 years of marital life here in September on the 25th. And as we started talking about this more seriously, you know, 2 years ago, like shortly after we got married, you know, we talked about all the kind of things that you just went over. You know, what is it? Is it a good thing to bring a child into this world at this moment? And the thing that I came back to is, you know, is often and as easy as it is to think about how bleak things are in the world. I mean, I think we also have to remember that for the vast majority of human history, life was much, much, much worse for virtually everybody. You know, we have these enormous challenges that are in front of us: climate change, threats to democracy, you know, technological change, nuclear weapon, whatever you want to talk about. And those are all serious, and we need to take them seriously. But I also think that it would be just simply incorrect to think that, you know, the life of, you know, the vast majority of children being born in the year of our Lord 2023 are going to be anything other than, you know, almost incalculably better and richer than the lives of the vast majority of people who have ever lived. And so I on the one hand, I think it's a totally reasonable question. I think that people should take it seriously. I would, frankly, more than the kind of the big picture existential stuff, we spend a lot of time just figuring, like, can we afford to have kids? You know, we have a home here in Coralville, Iowa, which is where we call home. We're looking at like childcare. My wife works full time. I work full time. I mean, we're gonna be paying more for childcare than we are for our mortgage. Yeah, you know, there's, you know, cost of college is continuing to go up, and, you know, there's the stuff now.
Childcare, and then you have to pay for pre-K.
I mean, yeah, totally. I mean, and, you know, we're fortunate. We have great public schools in this community, and so, you know, we're planning to have our kids be in our local elementary school and all that. But, you know, there's certainly, for a lot of young families, real financial pressure that comes along with having kids. And I think for us, frankly, it was some of the practical stuff more than the existential stuff. That was...
You both came down pretty much on the same side of that conversation.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it was basically, and we had slightly different, you know, concerns too. I mean, Chloe is from Sydney, Australia. Climate change, you know, sea level rise is like literally affecting where she grew up. You know, for me, like living here in Iowa, like the upper Midwest is maybe actually one of the better places in the U.S. to be in terms of like the impending climate threats.
Yeah,
but
you say that about Iowa being in a place on the planet where it's not as extreme, but yet you guys have had some. I mean, it's upstate New York. I think a lot about. I know what you're talking about there, but yet there have been more extreme weather events here, right? Like I feel like my friends here have told me about derechos. Like Mark Nolte's out there after every disaster with a chainsaw.
Mark and I went up together, actually. Yeah. Well, just to be clear, I don't think that
you and Mark showed up at my house
with the chainsaw.
Tree, yeah.
It was. I mean, I'll say this: I did Hurricane Katrina relief with a church youth group when I was a kid, and it was the closest thing that I'd seen, sans the water damage of like the water just sitting, which was a huge part of that, but just like the span of the damage and all that it was really remarkable. Just to be clear, I'm not saying that the upper Midwest won't have any of those extreme weather events. I'm just saying that relative to the rest of the country, the climate change is likely going to be a little bit less severe here. Now, that being said, we're already seeing, I mean, this year, obviously the hottest on record. Drought has been a significant issue. I've mowed my lawn like twice this summer, which has been nice for me and terrible for everybody who
I'm impressed that a state senator mows his own lawn. What's that there?
and terrible for everyone who depends on the ag industry, which is, we've seen real, I think there's a lot of concern about how that's going to affect this year's crop.
When I last talked to you on the record, it was because your state had passed a really terrible new law against women, reproductive rights, abortion, a ban. You can talk more about the specifics of it. But how has this state changed as a result of the Supreme Court overturning Roe, as a result of Dodd, as a result of kind of the attack on women's reproductive rights, and that legislation actually passing, Republicans and Republican Governor Kim Reynolds passing that? What's been the reaction to it all?
So Republicans have had essentially a 50-year strategy to overturn Roe versus Wade and pass these abortion bans all over the United States, and including right here in Iowa. Iowa did not have one of the so-called trigger laws that some other states have had, that once Roe was overturned, you basically had an abortion ban immediately take effect. Republicans have passed a series of restrictions on abortion, outright bans at 20 weeks, at 6 weeks, waiting periods, those kinds of things. And Republicans, essentially, once Roe was overturned, they were trying to pass a 6-week abortion ban here in Iowa. Now, 6 weeks is before many women even know that they're pregnant.
Right.
And remember, 6 weeks doesn't necessarily mean 6 weeks from like conception. I mean 6 weeks from the woman's last period. And so there's, you could be talking about 4 weeks, 5 weeks from conception. And so, again, before most women, 98%, right, of abortions happen after 6 weeks, because the vast majority of women just don't know that they're pregnant before then. Now, that law has had an injunction filed, and it's currently not in effect in the state of Iowa, but that could be overturned at almost any time. And we know that the actual solution to protecting reproductive autonomy in Iowa is to elect legislators who share that commitment. Now, something that's interesting is that we had thought that Republicans might try to amend our state constitution because there had been some previous state Supreme Court rulings that had protected abortion rights. Now, those have been overturned by a more conservative state Supreme Court in the same way that you saw Roe overturned at the federal level. But we also don't expect that Republicans now are going to try to amend the Constitution, in part because we know that amending the Constitution requires a vote across the state, and Republicans, my guess, would not be able to win that vote.
What is your conversation like with your fellow Republicans, whether it be in the Iowa State Senate or constituencies of yours or family, friends that you know? I feel like I don't even talk to people anymore that are kind of conservative Republicans or MAGA Republicans. I don't know what labels we even want to use, but like, how are your relationships? You're a young guy, one of the leaders in the state Senate. I would imagine people generally respect you and your intellect, your credibility on so many things. But what's it actually like?
So, as a Democrat, I don't necessarily share the worldview that my Republican colleagues have, but I do respect the fact that they've been elected to office. I respect the office that they hold, and we do have to work together. Now, this is true at the federal level as well. Probably 85% of the bills that we pass in the Iowa Senate are bipartisan, 49-50-0, and they're not really that controversial. It is the other 15% that are the high stakes, kind of where our political system is really focused on, especially at this moment of the disagreements and the divides. And frankly, those are the newsworthy bills, right? It's not newsworthy when you rename a bridge, right, necessarily. So from my perspective, it's really important to be able to have effective working relationships, because those 85% of the bills that you pass require cooperation to edit and amend and get the language right. And then on those remaining 15% of bills that are very high profile, very controversial, obviously Republicans have the votes. They have 34 votes in the Iowa Senate out of 50, so that's a 2/3. They have the votes to pass their agenda. If there are opportunities for us to amend the bills that they're putting forward to make them less bad, that's not satisfying, but it is our job as the minority party to reduce the damage wherever we can. So when I'm trying to build relationships with my Republican colleagues, I like to start on trying to find some common ground, whether it's both cheering for the Hawkeyes.
Yeah, anything.
Literally anything.
Anything you can start with to create a human relationship.
That's right. And the thing is, the ironic part is, once you have actually built that relationship, you can get up and rhetorically tear somebody to pieces. But if you have like a good working relationship, you can continue to work with each other.
Have you done that?
Oh, absolutely.
And they've done that to you.
Oh, for sure. But and that's part of the job, right? Is that you need to get out there and make sharp political arguments, because I think especially in the minority, it's your job to draw a contrast politically on the differences. So you can't shy away from that. Now, there's some people who don't want to do that, who don't feel comfortable doing that. But I think it's a really important thing for any minority party, and certainly, when I was the minority leader, that was something that we tried to emphasize.
Are there people your age on the other side of the aisle that are in the Senate?
Not in the Senate. There are in the House.
Yeah.
In fact, there's like a whole youth movement on Republicans in the House.
Really?
The average age for Republicans versus Democrats of elected officials in the state legislature, much younger for Republicans than Democrats.
Really?
I'm the youngest senator by 5 or 6 years, I think.
33?
32.
Sorry.
But in the House, there's like 23-year-olds in the state
What are
House.
their views like? How would you describe young Republicans? Are they religious? I mean, why are you a Republican and young? Question.
So I mean, most Republicans. It's funny. I always like to remind people of this, and this is true not just in the United States but across the country. Left-wing parties tend to be coalition parties. Lots of different identity groups that come together: racial minorities, gender and sexual minorities, religious minorities, labor unions,
social class,
social,
ethnic,
all of that
language,
stuff. That's right.
All of it.
Republicans, for all their criticism of identity politics, tend to be more identity-based parties. So in America, that's obviously a Christian, largely white, largely patriarchal, increasingly nationalist identity.
But when you say patriarchal, just real quick, can we unpack that as kind of for men, by men, but also a lot of women that are for men? Like, I feel like people don't realize, and I'm sure you have something to say about this and thoughts about this, that women can uphold patriarchy, that black folks can uphold white supremacy. Mm-hmm. That's a thing. It's not a controversial thing to say, but is that what you mean by that?
Just this morning, I was at a legislative breakfast put on by the Iowa City Area Association of Realtors. Realtors are a very well-organized interest group, not just in Iowa, but across the entire country. Sure. And they have this annual breakfast, and we were down there this morning, and we had some Republican...
Attractive people. Because they have to put their face on signs.
They're attractive, super well networked. I mean, like literally, it's their job to know people because they want to help you buy or sell a home. And so, as a politician, like you are actively trying to build relationships with people who know lots of people. Realtors certainly fall into that category, and there are lots of realtors who are Democrats, by the way. So, at this breakfast this morning, and there was a woman who was expressing some concern, one of the realtors in attendance, about how she'll oftentimes be showing people homes. People who are looking at taking a job at the University of Iowa, which is kind of the primary economic engine here in this community. And then they'll get to talking about politics and like what's the political direction of the state and where are things going, and how that's really alienating a lot of people who might otherwise want to move to Iowa because, it's a little bit more affordable.
Yeah.
And
I would love to hear their perspective on why people do or don't live here.
And an increasingly a growing reason why people choose not to move to Iowa is the hard right political direction that the Republican Party of Iowa has gone over these last several years. And one of the Republican women who was on the panel with me, immediately chimes in, we have a woman governor, we have a woman chief justice of our state Supreme Court, a woman attorney general, a woman floor managed the abortion ban. I don't want to be told that this is anti-woman. And it's so hard, not to roll your eyes, but it's also one of those things where it's so clear that, to your point, it's about trying to enforce a worldview on other people, right? If you think that abortion is immoral, there's a very simple solution. Don't have an abortion. If you think that, you don't want your kid reading a book about LGBT characters, then don't have those books in your home. Instead,
and I wouldn't.
Sorry. And what Republicans are doing instead is using their political power to prevent other people who may not share that same moral view about abortion or that same moral view about LGBT characters in books, and trying to enforce that on the rest of us.
For all the talk of government power,
absolutely, yes,
nobody wields it better than a Republican.
Yeah, well, I mean, and it's what's
Like
frustrating about that. And by the way, and this is probably a longer conversation, but this is, I think, actually one of Donald Trump's biggest ideological contributions, such as it is, to today's Republican Party. This right-wing populist use the government for our people has always been there for Republicans, but usually it's been about using elections to attack the ability of government to restrain like the richest people in our society. This is Reagan, slashing top marginal tax rates, and Bush, and all that. And you go back to Pat Buchanan and all of this in the 90s. It's all there. It's all the same stuff. But Trump winning, succeeding, and then really making it the core of today. Like, the Republican Party does not have an ideological core anymore. It's just Donald Trump.
Do you see that like here locally?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, what's interesting, and we were talking about this a little bit before we put the camera on, there is a distinction between Republican voters today and Republican leaders, at least in Iowa. So in Iowa, it's no secret that Governor Reynolds and Governor DeSantis are very close personally, and that if Governor Reynolds was going to endorse somebody, she would definitely endorse Ron DeSantis. I think almost 40 Republican state legislators between the House and Senate have endorsed DeSantis. Trump's gotten not even a dozen, I think, state legislative endorsements.
Oh yeah, he's been really harsh against
and he and
Iowa.
Governor Reynolds are beefing openly on
right.
truth.
He's like, I brought her to the party. Same thing he did with DeSantis.
100%.
She should be loyal, which is such a weird thing.
And so there's this weird thing right now where there are some Republican leaders who are actively trying to boost DeSantis, like somebody who's not Trump, but they can't because their voters. It is. I mean, cult of personality is obviously a loaded term, but I don't really know how else to describe it. There's a really a deep faith, blind trust, conviction, whatever you want to call it, in Donald Trump as the single anti-establishment figure who's willing to take the fight to them, and this whole thing. By the way, if you haven't listened to an honest to God Donald Trump rally, this 3-hour, you got to listen to at least one, because the themes that he's espousing, often don't really translate effectively into mainstream media headlines. But there's this real sense out there that he's cultivated and that he's tapped into. It's super anti-establishment. It's against the elites. It's against.
I feel like it's just mostly victimhood.
Absolutely.
The whole 3 hours is
Absolutely.
You've been wronged and
Correct.
I will
save you. And I'm here to fight for you. Absolutely.
And it's just so weird to see a lot of often middle, upper class white folks feeling wronged. It's like, what? I mean, anybody can feel wronged. I can talk and complain all day.
Yep.
But when I look at other people, I'm like, I think they might have had it a little bit hard. How are we the victims? But that victim mentality, it used to be the thing that they railed against. Still, they rail against. But yet in polling, white folks overwhelmingly say they are more discriminated against than black folks, which is
and this was, by the way,
a dangerous place to be.
This is exactly how Donald Trump won the Republican nomination back in 2016. If you go back and you look at polling data from the time, the single best predictor, if you were a Republican primary voter in 2016, was basically your racial resentment score. The higher your racial resentment, the more likely you were to vote for Donald Trump. I've got a bunch of charts. I'll send them to you. Throw them on the cast somehow. I don't really know how that works, but it's like it's a straight line to 100% correlation. And now that wasn't, I think, purely his appeal in the general election, right, which is bigger and tapped into some of these bigger anti-establishment forces. But if you want to talk about where did Donald Trump come from and how did he succeed in winning the Republican nomination in 2016, no doubt about it, racial resentment is a huge part of it.
When I think about the things that might unify us as a generation, as a people, however you want to categorize us, there's all kinds of different things that I would think about that we could name in the past that have unified people, like a war. But I feel like now we know that even in a war we won't be unified potentially because of COVID. And I wonder how, because I feel like people have become so extreme. We're sitting here talking about a lot of different policies and ideas, and obviously an ideology, a cult of personality when it comes to Trump. But my question to you is, my big concern is conspiracy theories, always has been. How much are you seeing the QAnon type of conspiracies, whether it be, I mean, are there any Republicans in the Iowa State House that think that hundreds of thousands of kids are being kidnapped and trafficked and their blood is being used and that to, create longevity for billionaires and just also litmus tests like, Trump actually won the election and climate change isn't happening and vaccines are killing people left and right. Like, that's not so much politics. We've entered into a place because we could talk about why, but a lot because of media. People will believe anything, and I'm wondering how bad that whole virus of thought has gotten here in Iowa, in the State House or in people that you know and talk to.
I don't know if it's necessarily worse in Iowa than it is in any other state where you see, anybody with an internet connection, basically. It's, the thing that I struggle with, we've always had alternative media outlets, partisan media outlets. If you go back to the founding of our country through the Civil War, really the post World War II period is the anomaly, not the norm, historically speaking.
But they stayed on the fringe. They were cranks.
A
lot of them.
Well, before pre-World War II, right, when you kind of shift to the broadcast model and you've got ABC, CBS, NBC, things change a little bit. These gatekeepers get a huge amount of clout and authority and all that. And the pendulum has swung back to where, it kind of used to be, which was that any schmuck with a printing press could print up a broadsheet and get his point of view out there. Now, granted, there's always barriers to entry with getting a printing press and whatever. But I do think that a huge part of what we've experienced in the last 12 plus years really is directly a result of media technology, Facebook, Twitter, social media, TikTok increasingly. You've seen this massive shift, the disinformation, the misinformation, all of that. It is absolutely technologically
makes millions
enabled.
of dollars. Alex Jones, these guys make millions and millions of dollars.
100%.
Saying that things that happened didn't happen,
correct,
including children being murdered.
Yeah, well,
didn't happen.
And all the Sandy Hook stuff.
Yeah.
And you see that crossover to the. I don't know if we consider Fox News a mainstream outlet, but with the Dominion lawsuit,
sure, it's a mainstream outlet. It's the most watched cable news. It is. It's corporate.
Fair enough.
Yeah,
but with them having that exposure through the Dominion case, the thing that really scares me, and I actually didn't really understand this until post 2016. I started trying to learn more about. Okay, people are saying the democracy is in danger. What does that mean? You learn that autocrats, would-be authoritarians, it's a very well-documented pattern of trying to confuse the truth to establish themselves as the authority of the truth, right? And just by creating confusion and creating doubt, that's a very well-established pattern, not just domestically in the U.S., but in many other countries as well. And so I think it is really important that we, and this is where I do think those of us on the left, our hands aren't perfectly clean in this either. There are plenty of things that I think that we need to do a better. The probably best example right now is this lab leak stuff that's coming out about the emergence of COVID-19 in the early days, Wuhan, and some of the concern about it escaping a laboratory over there. We need to find the right balance in our own side as well, and certainly to hold accountability for everybody.
No comparison.
I'm not saying that there's no.
Even that lab leak, I don't buy that. I'd love to talk to you more about that. I haven't followed it that closely, but I don't think there was a lab leak. There might have been, but if that's the example that you've got, fine, I'll take it. We were wrong about that.
Just to be clear, I don't think that there's necessarily. I don't think it's as bad on the left as it is on the right. But all I'm saying is that every American has
we all have biases. We've always got to check them. And given new information, we have to be able to change what we believe about things. But given new information, given data, and that's a possibility. Lab leak's a possibility. What's not a possibility is that kids that died didn't die. What's not a possibility.
Yeah, I agree with that. 100%.
We don't do those kinds of crazy conspiracies. JFK Jr. is going to come back, and everything that Alex Jones has said. Hillary Clinton's a demon.
RFK Jr. is pulling at 18, 15% within the Democratic Party right now.
Is he that high?
I think so.
Well, how much? I guess my question is: are there Republicans in the State House that believe? What's the craziest thing someone believes that's said to you or on the record?
I think that probably there are plenty of people who were.
Is anybody QAnon classified as QAnon?
I'm sure. I mean, like, but there are people who are, but there's nobody who's like going to be citing QAnon on the floor of the Iowa Senate yet.
Okay, that's good.
But there were for sure, I heard language about, like references to grooming, 2020 election truth stuff. And there's a huge amount of casual racism, right? Just like, black people are on the Democratic plantation or whatever.
Yeah, but those theories have always been, popular within conservatives, But I mean, I'm talking like the real. I'm glad to hear you say that. All right, I have two more big questions for you. One, you became famous overnight when your speech that you made when you were 19, in the same place you're now a senator, right? Mm-hmm. Went viral, and it was a speech about equality, about your moms. And I wonder, having that be the issue that really brought you in and is so close and near to you personally, how have you seen attitudes change around LGBT equality? I feel like the transgender issue has really changed a lot of it, but people now have gone, they're confused about it, they don't understand it. Fine. A lot of us don't. That's okay. But they've gone way past that, any kind of bigotry about it, and now just using that against mainstream gay folks, considering maybe taking rights that they've hard fought won. How much have you seen attitudes change? Are young conservatives anti-gay here in Iowa?
So I'd say that.
And do they conflate it all? Is it all conflated?
Yeah, well, so I mean, I'd say it's actually been kind of the opposite. If anything, they've really gone after transgender people, and largely, although not entirely, left kind of the LGB folks alone. No, the emergence and the polarization, the sharp polarization around transgender issues, was a deliberate political strategy by ultra right wing conservatives. And they were looking for a new tool to use after they lost marriage equality. They stumbled on the transgender issue. They've really used it to devastating effect. In Iowa, they've passed bans on transgender athletes participating in high school sports. They've also gone after kind of these don't say gay bills in the classroom. If you're a gay teacher, can you have a photo of you and your husband, or a lesbian teacher, you and your wife on your desk? Like, frankly, the law is not really clear anymore about whether or not that's allowed. Republicans have banned a number of books that have LGBT themes, some of which are like definitely explicit, and I'm not necessarily sure that I would want a fifth grade student reading some of the books that were out there if it was my kid. But I don't think that it's, again, this goes back to what we were talking about earlier. It's about enforcing a worldview on other people and saying, look, I don't want my kid to read this book, so your kid shouldn't read this book, or whatever the case may be, right? I wouldn't want my kid to have access to hormonal therapy, so your kid can't have access to hormonal therapy. It's really, by the way, it's using the power of government to limit the freedom of people to live their own lives, make their own decisions, for families to raise their kids the way that they want to do that. And that's fundamentally, I think, that's fundamentally wrong. And so I think that you've certainly seen LGBT issues, the issues themselves have changed, attitudes have changed. There was a bill introduced last year earlier this year, to reverse marriage equality in Iowa. It thankfully didn't go anywhere. It had like 6 co-sponsors. It was like the ultra fringe. So I don't see marriage equality being under threat anytime soon. But we should not make any... we have to be really clear that the attacks that we're seeing on transgender people are real, they're present, they're dangerous, and they absolutely are going to cost lives. We had a debate earlier this year on the ability of minors to access gender-affirming care, and I gave a speech on that actually went pretty viral on TikTok, and it, just talking like really clearly about.
I'll find it and grab it and play it.
Honestly, it made me a person on TikTok. I was not really on TikTok before. Now I've got like 100.
That's great. That's a great way to make your name. Yeah, I've made like 50 videos. Nothing.
Yeah,
2 people, 2 followers. I got other accounts.
I got a Zoomer who was my legislative intern this year, and he just like did it up. So
that's awesome.
That's the key.
So your speech, as a result of that, you.
Yeah, I mean, but it's basically just like, look, we need to confront what's happening, which is that this is a direct, clear, present danger against transgender people in this country.
But I mean, when you mentioned a lot of the different policies. I think a lot of the fight, certainly in my town and around the country, has been at the school board, and I think people need to be in that fight. I say it almost every day.
Those elections are coming up here in many communities across the country in just a few weeks. Literally, that second Tuesday in November, odds are very, very high that there's a school board election in your community.
Yeah. So get involved. There's a group most likely already operating get involved. But, I mean, you know, you see these rainbow flags being torn down, the woman in California being shot. I mean, so it's like there's a lot of regression and hate and violence against gay people that wasn't there most of our lives, most of your life for sure. I mean, there was so much progress, and it seems now people are having to be concerned about a flag. They're taking them down. I mean, the rainbow flag was not that controversial, I felt like, for a long time, but maybe that's just my...
Well, I think there's always been some controversy, and, you know, especially, you know, New York's different from most places in Iowa. Iowa City is probably the most progressive community in the state.
I guess it was probably controversial in a lot of places.
But the trend line was pointing in the right direction for most of your life, certainly nearly all of mine. You know, the AIDS epidemic was maybe a low point, but aside from that, the trend line, I think, have been pointing in the right direction. But we've seen, especially in just the last few years, this really visceral, reactionary, anti-LGBT force emerge. That should scare everybody, no doubt about it.
Finally,
and by the way, Pete, the only thing I'll say on that is, like, it is precisely when we're scared that it's most important to find that courage, to be an effective ally, to keep that pride.
Why would I
up,
want to do anything to rock the boat? My life is good.
Yeah,
I think that's the question. A lot of white folks in the suburbs where I live. Like, why would I do anything? I mean, things are good for me. So why would I stir things up and bring attention to myself?
Yeah, look, everybody's reasons for being an ally are different, right? Maybe you have a kid, maybe it's a friend, maybe it's a colleague. You know, everyone has a different why, and only you can figure out what that is for yourself. But once you've found it, you know, you have. I think that courage piece is just really important, and it's doubly important in moments like the one that we're in.
What's next for you? You've been a senator. You've been reelected, what, twice? Once. I mean, you're one of the most respected guys in Iowa. You're really smart. You're young. You're a beautiful man. You're about to write an Iron Man. You've got an amazing wife. Like, on paper, you seem like you should be considering, I'm shoulding you, but society does that, culture does that, like even a higher office here in Iowa. I mean, will you ever run for U.S. Senate or governor of Iowa? What's next for you? Is that, I don't like when people ask that question, by the way, so feel free to be like, tomorrow is next. I'm running a fucking Ultraman this weekend. That's what's next. You know, I'm trying to start a family, but like career-wise, is there a next logical step for you? Do you have ambition for even a higher office?
Yeah, look, I certainly wouldn't rule out running statewide, running for the U.S. House. It all just depends on what the opportunity looks like. And one of the things that
don't bullshit me. What's it look like? You're waiting. You must be waiting for some office to open up. I mean, Chuck Grassley. Why can't you run for U.S. Senate?
Oh, well, I think I could, but I mean, again, it's whether it's statewide, so that's U.S. Senate or governor, or they're down ballot. You know, Secretary of States oversees state elections; those are super important. State treasurer oversees a lot of our pension system. That's really important. I mean, like one of the things that I've learned is in this line of work, if you start trying to play chess rather than checkers, it's just the moves get so complicated so fast, and no one can really predict what's going to happen in 2024, 2026. And so you can drive yourself crazy saying, hey, you know, well, I think that Biden's going to lose re-election, so 2026 will be a good Democratic year,
right.
You know, or whatever. But it's like no one really knows. And so the way that I approach it is do the best that you can with the job you got, build a strong political organization, which basically means having a strong network.
But you must have one of the strongest networks in Iowa.
Yeah, look, I was actually really fortunate. You know, we haven't really talked about this, but I was at the age of 29 elected to lead the Senate Democratic Legislative Caucus, which was the first time ever that a first-term senator. So I was the youngest ever, you know, and I learned a lot in those 2.5 years. I stepped away from that position in June following some disagreement within the caucus over some personnel decisions that I made. But it gave me the opportunity to build a network statewide. So I feel like if I find the right opportunity, the right office, whether it's, you know, running against Chuck Grassley, if he's running for re-election in 2028, which, you know, you say Jesus, but
he'll be 112.
I mean, who? Shoot, you
Jody
never know.
Ernst, when is her term up?
She's up in 26. So look, there are going to be opportunities.
Let's go.
But it's about I don't want to commit myself to anything or take anything off the table.
Is it money? What do you need? I've got. I'm looking around. I've got no money, but I guess I got.
But let's put it like this. If the opportunity is right, I feel good about it. My family's in the right place. I'm certainly not afraid to take that next step. I just don't want to tell you what that is because I don't know what it is. So
you'll tell me when I hit stop?
I'll tell you when I see what the opportunity is. I don't have anything to say to you off the record that I wouldn't say on the record.
Why are you running an ultra or an Ironman? Why are you doing that?
I've been fascinated by triathlon since I was a kid.
All right.
In 2000, the Olympics were in Sydney, Australia, and it was the first time triathlon had ever been in the Olympics. And I remember watching this when I was a kid and was just fascinated with the sport. So I've done triathlon kind of off and on throughout my adult life. And I'd actually been trying to get one done before I turned 30, which obviously I was not successful in doing, in part because COVID hit and everything kind of went to hell in a handbasket.
Yeah.
And then I wanted to do one last year, but then I hurt my hamstring because I'm not in my 20s anymore, so you get injured a lot more easily. And I finally rehabbed the hamstring. I did my first full half Ironman in June, beat my goal time by 15 minutes.
Wow.
And now I'm just trying to finish the race.
Yeah, finishing
here
is
on
winning.
Sunday.
That's amazing. It's
so
a couple days away.
Yeah, that's
right. Great. Good luck to you.
Appreciate it.
I really appreciate you talking to me and being my friend and showing me around as always, picking me up at the airport. And it's always great to see you and talk to you, Zach.
My pleasure, Pete.
There you go, ladies and gentlemen. Zach Wahls, State Senator in Iowa. Look him up. Follow him on all the social medias. Let him know that you heard him here. You can email him. You can ask him whatever you want. And I really very much appreciate him joining me, picking me up at the airport, and joining me in my hotel room there. And he did complete the Ironman, and he actually beat his goal time by 15 minutes. Congratulations, Zach, on that and everything else, and hopefully a beautiful budding family soon. Folks, can't do it without you. Thank you so much. Write a review. Follow me on all the social medias. Upgrade your subscription. Thank you if you've been with me for a long time, and you don't ever need to do that, so I don't want to make you feel guilty. I love you. I appreciate you, and I will talk to you tomorrow. I've got to go post this today. John Carroll, take us away.
I think you're driving wheels been leaking grease. Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know what's right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You got to stand up. That's right. You got to rise up. You got to stand up. You got to stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear when all you hear is a lie. Don't get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. Even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. This is the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We got to let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up.